Welcome to Panelism, the podcast where we talk about the comics and graphic novels we're reading. I'm Todd A.
Taylor Trask.
Welcome, Taylor, to another episode of Panelism.
Yes. We just finished recording a book pick of my own, so I'm glad we can roll right into your episode too. If you haven't listened to that yet, go back and listen to my review of Analog.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great little pick. I guess what's new with you this week? For those of you who are listening fresh, Todd, what's new in your world? What's going on?
Oh boy, still we've reached the California autumn where it is freezing when I wake up and uncomfortably warm all day.
Oh geez.
So I am hopefully finally defeating this what I originally thought was allergy attacks, and then discovered with a trip to the walk-in that it was a sinus infection. And of course I said, it started right when the Santa Anas kicked back up, and they were all like, oh yeah, that's exactly it. Everyone.
And one thing I haven't asked you haven't been adversely affected by all the fire smoke, have you? Because California's burning down as we speak. Yeah,
it's not good. We haven't really felt it, but it's related because those fires started right when the Santa Ana winds just came back, and you could tell. I mean, it was literally like overnight. There was a warning about Santa Anas and a red flag warning, and the next day there were these huge fires, and my whole head was stopped up. So, and not related to the fires, but these winds. I mean, it's such a big deal out here. I thought it was charming when Belinda Carlisle sang about it in "Circle in the Sand" or whatever song that was.
There's a deep cut if there ever was one.
Yeah, nobody could. Come on, "Circle in the Sand" fans. But
we go listen to Belinda Carlisle when we did recording.
Yeah, it was like her second single off the "Heaven Is a Place on Earth" CD.
Circle in the sand.
Isn't that when she mentions the Santa Anas?
I don't recall.
But where I live in Orange County, there's this really sort of, I don't know whether it's creepy or not, indication that the Santa Anas are really strong, which is the planes reverse their course into John Wayne Airport.
Okay.
And
wow.
So they want to land against the wind. So they have to fly out over the coast and then come inland is their approach, so that the wind is at their head. So it's just strange, it's like from where, like I can literally walk outside and just see the direction of the planes landing and go like, oh yeah, we're in for it.
Let's start with the fact that there's an airport called John Wayne Airport. I did not realize this.
Oh my God. I asked you earlier this week if you were a Arrested Development fan, and you said no, but there's a great line in Arrested Development where Tobias Funke, played by David Cross, is like imitating John Wayne. And he's like, I'm John Wayne. I'm a big man. I'm going to put my name on an airport.
Jeez.
That's what he's known for.
I want to clarify, though, for those of you listening going, what? He's not an Arrested Development fan? It's not that I don't. I mean, I think it's a great little show. I just haven't had the time and attention yet to give it my full, A-OK. I think it's interesting. I'm sure it's delightful. I just haven't. Yeah. It hasn't crossed my path. It's not that I don't like it. It's just that I haven't.
Good clarify. Yeah. You were. I shouldn't have said you're not a fan. You have not seen it. Yes,
that's right. I mean, because to say you're not an Arrested Development fan, or that you dislike it, I think that puts a giant dent in my credibility. So I just want to clarify that right now.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, I get that. Good one. Yeah, I'm going to start using that actually because after book club last night, a few of us went and got drinks, and there was this funny talk where you would notice whatever sort of fandom we discussed went to where some people had no exposure to it. And it went from like Game of Thrones to Harry Potter to like some certain horror movie genre to this, the series of books. And no matter what it was, several people would bond over this being like a big thing in their life. And then, there would always be one or two people that went, I have no idea what this is.
Yes.
So yeah, you're on that side of like, you just haven't really been exposed to it. But yeah.
That's how I feel about the animated series in the 80s. There's two. One is called Silverhawks, and the other one is called Brave Star. And every time I bring up Brave Star, I bring up Brave Star because he has the same gun that Star-Lord does in Guardians of the Galaxy. And I was like, oh, that's like Brave Star's gun. And people are like, what the hell is Brave Star? I'm like, it came out at the same time as Silverhawks. They're like, what the hell is Silverhawks? And I was like, I can't handle it. So I'm like, these are two iconic 80s cartoons that should be, Netflix could easily reboot both right now and they'd be great, but nobody knows what they are but me.
Silverhawks sounds really familiar to me. I'll have to Google that at a later time, but it's not exactly an 80s throwback, but I got a good throwback for us today to talk about.
Oh, for your book pick. Yeah.
So I alluded to this a couple episodes ago, and got it off the shelf and thought this will be my next pick. Let's do it. This is a comic book published by DC Comics, who, creators and what do we want to call it? Like curators of Batman and Catwoman, these 60 plus years. But this is called Just Imagine Stan Lee's Catwoman. And with the passing of Stan Lee, in the past couple of weeks, we're not exactly sure when this will air, but about 2 weeks ago, Stan Lee passed away, and you and I mentioned this on an episode. It kind of brought this up, and I said at the time, it's just such a quintessentially sort of Stan Lee take on a DC character. And so I actually did a slight bit of research for this episode. If you've listened to it before, you'll know that I just really don't prepare at all besides reading the book. But I also tried to get the timeline right, because one thing I always forget about is Stan Lee had actually stepped away from Marvel in the 90s, but he was still the chairman emeritus. And Wikipedia points out he was still earning $1 million a year for that honorary title.
Wow. Damn.
Yeah. But he had started, this is crazy too. I want to tell you this just because it's crazy. So he started a thing called Stanley Media with someone named Peter Paul, which is amazing to me that this guy has an alliterative name. It's like Stanley almost made this guy up. Anyway, but Peter Paul was illegally manipulating stock.
Oh.
And so Stanley Media, this was near the end of 1999, had to file for bankruptcy protection in 2001. Paul had to be extradited to the U.S. from Brazil. Anyway, Lee was never implicated in the scheme. So it was around 2001, Stanley formed, with a couple other partners, formed this thing called POW Entertainment.
Oh, yeah.
And that was what you and I were trying to think of in that past episode. We knew he had done this other side thing, and we couldn't remember what it was. The big thing they were known for was that hit cartoon, Stripperella. Ugh.
Wait, really? That was...
Yeah.
Oh, no.
That was like one of the first things they developed.
Well, they also developed, this may be completely wrong, but if I recall correctly, there was back in the days when Sci-Fi Channel was, like actually had the planet sort of logo and was true sci-fi. They had this thing called Stan Lee's Who Wants to Be a Superhero show. And I think that was also
all about that,
because I remember seeing the POW logo come up at the end of that.
Yep.
In the credits. Which, that show, it was a reality show. It was kind of like American Idol, but it was, people would come and create their superheroes and they'd have to dress up like them, basically like pitching their character.
Yeah. And they would have to do like super feats and stuff, right?
Yeah.
I mean, not like super, but it was sort of like a parkour or something.
Yeah, kind of. And then like there's other challenges and things, and Stanley was kind of the host / judge. But then at some point when they got down to like the final 4 or 5, they basically helped them refine the characters. So they gave them a costume boost, and all these guys came to the show kind of with their own homemade stuff, and they added and took away. It was I remember when it came out, it was like mid 2000s.
Yeah, no, and this was absolutely, I mean, I'm looking at the Wikipedia article. It was absolutely a POW Entertainment production.
Okay, great.
And yeah, 2006 to 2007. Yeah.
that absolves him of the Stripperella.
Oh, good. Okay. Yeah. I mean, it's such a it's like in retrospect, it's the name.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
More than anything, because wasn't it Pamela Anderson Lee?
Yeah, I believe so.
Yeah.
She's Barbarella. No, she's Barbara.
She was Barbed Wire.
Barbed Wire. There we go.
But it was like, why not make maybe they did make a Barbed Wire cartoon. I don't even know. This is probably a rabbit hole not worth
Probably not.
falling in.
Stripperella is not your book. That's basically
No.
gist of this story.
But to set that time around, like, so in 2001, DC actually contracted with Stan to do a whole series of Just Imagines.
Okay.
And so there were 13 issues where he reimagined DC characters. And actually these books, this is a thing, I just totally did not even know any of this. I don't know how many years ago I got the Catwoman book, but I'm kind of a Catwoman fan, and she's one of those great characters of like through the years to see how she's changed and how different artists and writers interpret her. So there was a good chunk of time where whenever I would find just an old Catwoman book, before we even like called them trade paperbacks or something, just like collected editions or something, I would just grab it. Mm-hmm. So I have all these random books, and they never really fit in any continuity. This was just sort of one of those where I went, oh, it's, it's gonna, yeah. I know it's not gonna tie in directly to this other stuff, but it sort of goes in my random collection, whatever. And then I remember reading at the time, and I actually forgot all about this when you and I mentioned it a couple episodes ago. This is not Selena Kyle. No. Stan Lee imagined totally different names and backgrounds for these characters. I'll run you through the list really quickly. He did a Batman story, a Wonder Woman, Superman, Green Lantern, Flash, Robin, Shazam, Aquaman, Catwoman, Sandman, not the Neil Gaiman one, and then a Justice League of America. I don't know. I don't know if you could guess this, but given what I just said about his partner, Peter Paul, this is Catwoman's name is not Selena Kyle. It is Joni Jordan.
Of course.
And I only found out on Wikipedia that in his Batman book, it's Wayne Williams, and Wonder Woman is Maria Mendoza.
Oh, gotcha. I'm looking at, I just Googled Stan Lee's Just Imagine. I'm seeing the cover for both this Catwoman book, but also his JLA. And it looks just like any DC Elseworlds kind of book. But I'm just looking, even like his Batman, I'm like, oh, okay, this is interesting. It's interesting that DC would let him do this.
And it's like he's not at Marvel. He's Stan Lee Media has folded.
Yeah,
it's right before POW is formed, and he just comes on board to write basically a year of single issue kind of things, but ties them together with some bad guys so that there's a way they can all come together in the Justice League issue and work together or whatever.
We have to address some things right out of the gate. Yeah. I'm looking at this book and I'm seeing the way they're depicting Catwoman, and she looks like Edward Scissorhands. Like she looks like not like anything I would ever imagine Catwoman to look like. How long did it take for you to just sort of buy into this character in this world and the way it's presented?
Honestly, finding out that this was a whole series of things both cheered me, but also kind of depressed me, because I was not depressed, but it just sort of was like, oh man, I actually sort of liked the idea that this was just some random standalone, or maybe he'd only done a couple issues or something, because it is so kind of old school. I mean, certainly by 2001, when I wasn't really reading comics. I mean, I know I didn't get this in 2001. That was sort of, that was in my off time of reading comics. So I can't really speak to the comics around at that time, but it definitely has that Stan Lee feel. It was for sure before the time where narration was omnipresent. Like first person narration is now just omnipresent in all books. There's always like those little boxes where it's one character narrating it. And for the past many years, DC has been doing it where they will sort of, color in the box. And maybe sometimes, I know in the Superman Batman books, they'll one of their sigils will appear. So, if Batman's thinking this or Superman's thinking this, so they can have this sort of, not just monologuing, but not really dialoguing, just dual monologuing or something. This is before all that. And it's very Stan Lee in where the character is literally saying everything that's happening to her, and she's saying it out loud. So, there's no thought bubbles. It's just, her talking to like her cat, and she's like, oh, you're safe with me, even though we live alone here in the big city, or something like that. And you're like, that's such a weird thing to say right now, right before thieves break in the door. So then just a couple pages in, she, in the perfect Stan Lee sort of creation of a superhero. These thieves break into her home, which first of all, I should explain, the thieves have the worst plan you've ever heard of to break into a bank, which is there's some huge big baddie that has like superpowers, and he sends his gang out to break into this bank, and just straight up rob the bank, which first of all is just the dumbest plan ever, for anyone to rob a bank. Like those those rarely go right, and you certainly can't make a living doing it, and you're probably not going to get that much money.
I believe the Heath Ledger Joker would beg to disagree, but go on.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Well, he burned all his profits, so he definitely didn't make out.
That's right.
But
he got a good suit out of it.
At least he had a better plan. So
he had a great plan. I love
burglars. The head bad guy says to the burglars, "There's one person that's like," they're like, "We can't break into that bank. It's so secure." And the super bad guy, whose name is Fergo, tells them, and he's dressed in just a straight up 1960s astronaut suit. Like that's just what he wears. Yeah, we don't know why. Fergo tells them there's one person that's going to be key to this, and she's going to get you on the inside. Smash cut to Joni Jordan in her underwear talking to her cat. But he doesn't explain how they're going to get, how she's going to get him in the bank. And then I guess at first it's kind of clever writing, because you think like, wait, is she a bad guy? What's going on? And it's clearly the protagonist here. No. Their plan is just to threaten her with death unless she walks them in. Because she's a model. She's a model who's working the opening. So they break into her apartment. Like they literally smash the door down, guns drawn, in order to convince her to walk them into the bank with her. Just terrible. Like no tact.
Is she Catwoman at this point?
No.
So she's still just regular old
inciting incident. They smash down the door. She has just comforted her cat, and because of the scary thunder and lightning, and her cat's name is Ebony. It's a black cat, and she's near the window when this thief is threatening her, and all of a sudden a bolt of green lightning shoots into the apartment, striking her and her cat together. And it's, of course, the lights go out, and these thieves are sort of mysteriously defeated in the dark. Something runs around and slashes their guns and causes them to accidentally fire at each other. And she has become part cat.
This only sounds slightly less ridiculous than the Halle Berry Catwoman movie.
It's much less ridiculous than that. That was definitely ridiculous. She just fell out a window, and then a bunch of cats stepped on her or something, right?
Well, that was Michelle Pfeiffer. She felt like Christopher Walken pushed her out of the window. She falls to her death. Cats start like kind of licking her and nipping at her, and she kind of wakes up zombified. And I think Halle Berry, I'll be honest, I've only seen maybe 20 minutes of that movie in its entirety, and that the origin scene was not one of them. And so I only kind of, I think there was a similarity though.
I remember reading it thinking like, oh yeah, that I made a similarity there too, but I honestly don't remember the origin either. It's, so there's that other thing of like, it feels throwback in comics where the hero gains these weird powers and instantly knows how to use them. She's moving around in the dark, slicing, there's nothing weird like, what the hell is happening to me? She's just slicing their guns apart with these huge claws. And then there's honestly like a really great panel of her standing looking out the window with the rain coming in, and it's just like this, it's half the panel, it's a full page, half of it is black, and you see her claws extending down into the black. They're not like cat claws, they're really long. And fortunately, she says aloud, just like Ebony, I can extend my claws, but they're much longer than hers, in case you didn't pick up on that. So she just literally tells you everything that happened to her. It was after the green lightning bolt hit me. I was able to see in the dark like a cat. I feel stronger, faster, more alert, every nerve tingling.
Did her cat die in this process? Like, did the cat like get merged into her body?
I think there's a moment where you think that, and then literally on the next page, she turns around and she's telling you, I can retract my claws at will. And then the cat springs into the frame. Ebony, thank heaven you're all right. So the cops show up and, she just presents it as a break-in gone wrong, but she becomes very famous because she's this model. And so that, there's a news story about how this model foiled a robbery. And so her agent at the modeling agency is like, wow, now I can double her rates.
That's the first thing he thinks about.
Yeah. And there are actual
I'm going to
there are actually thought bubbles for him. He doesn't say this out loud. He says, that means I can charge my clients more for her. And then another thought bubble, but I mustn't let her know or she'll want a raise. And then literally 3 panels later, she's in the frame and he's on the phone saying, if you want Joni Jordan, you got to pay double from now on.
You got to wonder how much of that is pulled from Stan's real life. Like, was that something he had with his own agent that he's like, I'm going to put this in my book? Well,
he did sue Marvel in 2005, it looks like. When he was not getting the royalties he thought he should get for X-Men and the Spider-Man films.
Little did he know that was going to change in a big bad way soon.
Yeah. So so she's a model, which is weird. And the way this news story plays into it is that her father is a retired police inspector. And so initially I thought, he's sort of merging the, oh my God, the chief, Batman's chief.
Gordon.
Yeah, he's merging the Gordon story in this, but no, this guy's retired. He was inspector. Of course, he's Jordan. That's what led me. A Jordan Gordon thing was what was stuck in my head. And this is Inspector Gordon. And so she goes to visit her father, and Inspector Jordan, who's retired, is like, he's like, hey, you did a good job fighting off those people, and you showed them what regular folk can do. But it's not like those terrible superheroes that are out there acting like vigilantes. So she thinks, I don't even, she may say this out loud. Oh no, I mustn't tell my father that I am the Catwoman. So
it'd be amazing if she said that out loud in front of him. Like,
right, that would be perfect. I want to write a comic book that is like that. Like, it has that shirtless bear fighter literalness to it, where, it's all the superhero tropes where nothing is hidden, but she's just saying it out loud. So she goes,
what was that? It's like, nothing, Dad. I can't let you know my true secret. Wait, you just said just now you can't let me know your true secret. Never mind.
Like, oh no, I said that out loud. Wait, what you're saying that out loud?
That could be amazing.
Wow. Dad's detective instincts are still sharp.
We've got to write that separately. Yeah. Sorry.
So she, obviously that leads her to think, well, I can't just walk around as Joni Jordan with like Catwoman stuff. I need a disguise. She goes back home and says aloud, of course, thank God I know how to sew really well. And so she makes a Catwoman outfit for herself. She puts on a dark wig and kitty ears. So it's that part's a little strange. And it seems that she has like painted her face pale, but it's not. I mean, it's paler definitely when she is Catwoman. She goes out. She sort of learns her superpowers in a Spider-Man, sort of montage of jumping from building to building to see if she can do it. Then she is immediately a superhero. That's the thing. As she goes and saves a family from a burning building, just standard superhero stuff. But Fergo, little does she know that Fergo is just very upset that his bank heist has been foiled by this girl. So he sends his gang out to get the girl again. They kidnap her. They lock her up. Fergo is very enchanted with her. He locks her up. She goes along with this because she's dressed as Joni Jordan, doesn't want to spoil her identity, gets put in a padded cell, and then, for whatever reason, just decides to spoil her identity and, slashes them up and runs out of there, and tries to fool them as she's doing that, like literally saying aloud, thank God Catwoman snuck in and liberated me so that you guys don't know this happened or whatever. It's like, wow, the mind control in this is amazing. And then in another part that just, to me, like sort of, it just doesn't really make sense is, so she decides to go to that bank opening anyway in her model self, but she's got the black wig on. So she goes looking like Catwoman, just in street clothes. Wow. So of course the bank heist is going on. They have, they're bullying one of the different models, but Joni sneaks in, because they recognize her as the other model. So the guards let her in. She foils the robbery. She sees Fergo trying to escape with his jetpack, which she says, son of a gun, he's got some kind of flying gear.
And he's dressed like an astronaut. I mean,
yes. And there's like clearly like a pack on his back with fire shooting out of it. So she, it goes up and fights Fergo in the sky, destroys his suit, which causes him to die in some way. And then luckily survives this crazy fall from the atmosphere. Not like Batman and Robin by wave boarding on a door from an escape pod, but
I forgot all about that.
Like a cat where she sort of, learns how to fall and bounce from ledge to ledge. And of course she has to tell you like, I got to think of a cat and how they always land on their feet. And then spring, she's down, she's safe. She's reunited with the people at work. Everybody's happy. She sees her father again, and he's now, of course, fully cursing Catwoman. And she's like, I'm going to have to keep this secret to myself, Joni Jordan. I can't ever tell my father that I am Catwoman. So that is Stan Lee's Catwoman. And I just, it's fun to make fun of it, but it's definitely like that hilarious, charming kind of, old school comic book tale. Like that's all the cliches are there. You can just imagine what her manager at the model agency looks like. He's short, he's bald, he's got like a scruffy beard, definitely got the cigar, chomping on that while he's like yelling on the phone always in his hand. Yeah. It's like just what if it's J. Jonah Jameson, but we shrink him down a little bit, take his hair off. Yeah. So it's, but it's illustrated in such a like late 90s, early 2000s fashion of just a lot of sharp angles.
Who did the art?
Oh yeah, I'm glad you asked. It was Chris Bachalo and Richard Friend. And I think, Chris was the pencil art and then Richard was the inker on it.
Okay.
There's also a Darwin Cook story told at the end, or at least like penciled by him at the end. Let me see who did the art on that. Sorry. Who did the story on that? Michael Uslan did the story at the end, and Darwin Cook did the pencil. And at that time, Darwin was sort of known for his throwback style. So there's like the short story at the end that's told in the same kind of tone and stuff, but it's it looks like Darwin Cook's art. And to be honest with you, like I've probably every time I've read this, I just sort of read part of that and go, I'm not interested. And not because of any like the content or anything. It's just that the novelty to me is the Stan Lee story. And, on one hand, it's like, wow, if you only have whatever it is, like 34 pages or something, 32 pages to tell this story, how do you do that without being so literal? And so I alluded to, I discovered there's this other weird character that shows up. If you looked at the Wikipedia, you might have seen it. I can't remember his name. It's something Dark. It's like Professor Dark or something like that.
He really stretches for his names, doesn't he?
Reverend Dark. And
Reverend
it's just
Dark.
this sort of otherworldly being, in a big cloak, and he looks real spooky. But I guess it's very senseless why that character is in this panel when Fergo is obviously the bad guy. But Dark is the character that repeats through all of these books that they have to go after together at the end. So, that's pretty much all there is to it. I spoiled the hell out of this, like I told you off air that I would do, but you and I agreed. It's like, first of all, it's 16 years old. And it also, I don't think ruins the enjoyment of it for me to just tell you literally what the story is. I think the fun of it is that zany story, and hopefully I conveyed that. And, I would think it's just kind of an artifact in these days. So soon after Stan's passing, it's like, oh, let's just kind of go back and look at like all the kooky stuff he made. Like this is such a B-side kind of thing.
Yeah.
Everyone's going to search these out, of course, but the A-sides are going to get a lot of attention. Go for the deep cuts.
I liked that. You're right. Cause everybody's going to, in the sort of this initial period, everybody's going to go back to kind of the greatest hits, but it's this kind of thing, that really, and I'm glad you did get into so much detail. Cause if I was listening and I didn't know that it was this literal and kind of kooky and weird, like I would have gone into it with a very different expectation.
Yeah.
So now I like it, so I can just read it purely for the fun of it and just not be, know exactly what I'm getting into.
I'm glad you said that, like you repeating that back to me, or you're saying that about the kookiness, is that it emphasizes to me that it's important. It's an important point that this is like camp in the best sense. And I'm drawing on I believe John Waters was talked one time about how camp, you can't always plan for camp. Sometimes the best camp stuff has been made totally seriously, and it just doesn't know how campy it is, and like Showgirls, the movie, is one of those things. And I think this is one of those things. Like, I don't think this was written. I don't think the creators thought like, oh, this is so kooky to have, it's not like Shirtless Bear Fighter where the literalness is the kookiness.
Yeah.
This was just, that's how Stanley wrote, I think. And, and the conventions of the time, there weren't those narrator boxes and stuff like that. So you've got to look at it like there's distinct reasons why sometimes the character's saying something in a thought bubble and sometimes just speaking it out loud. It's so weird. Like, why would you think like to speak all this exposition out loud?
Yeah.
But, the thought bubbles just looked different. Like, it looked weirder to do that at the time. So anyway. Yeah.
Tell me if this creates an entire new episode to discuss. But after reading this, do you feel you have a better handle or a more contextual handle on how Stan Lee writes female characters? And I ask this because I feel like he is of a time, and I'm not saying he's a womanizer. I'm not saying any of that, but I think he is. Based on this and based on some other things I've read, I kind of feel like he's a little predisposed to making the female characters a little too on the nose sometimes. And sometimes that works in his favor. I'm just wondering if this particular story gives you any more clarity into that.
No, actually, but I mean, it only raises more questions. Like, that's a really interesting question. That's a really interesting way to approach that topic, because I think Stan Lee, he is obviously a creature of his times. He's 95 years old this year. So he was born in like, the 20s.
Yeah. It's hard to remember that. Like, in the 70s, he was already old, right?
Yeah. Like this was written when he was a spry 79-year-old.
I mean, think about that. Like, we forget this because he's always kind of looked the same since the early 80s. So it's kind of like, oh, he's just immortal now. But like, as a comparison point, go back and read some of those early like Spider-Man books in the 70s or 60s or 70s. Like, he uses the word like machismo, like when like the villains will be like, my masculine machismo will help me. And it's like, wow, what era were you raised in? And it's like, oh, the 20s. Well, of course.
Right.
Like, this makes perfect sense. So I wonder if just sort of his backdrop of growing up influences the way he writes or deals with women characters. I'm just curious.
Well, I mean, I'll tell you, if I ever cross paths with some of these other Just Imagine books, I'll pick them up, because it would be interesting to see like the Wonder Woman one. And I believe in his Just Imagine, the Flash is a woman.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. The Flash, Mary Maxwell. So I would absolutely pick those up if I see them. Are we
sure that Peter Paul isn't like his John Barron, like his fake character that he created, like like Donald Trump created this fake character, like do PR for him, like Peter Paul. Like somebody calls up, like he calls the New York Times. He's like, they're like, New York Times. He's like, hi, true believers, this is Peter Paul. They're like, you sound like Stan Lee. No, not at all. I am Peter Paul. It's like,
oh, my stock manipulation scheme has gone awry. That wasn't me. That was Peter Paul.
Peter Paul. And like his intern at the time just takes the fall for him. It's like, this is how he.
I mean, they did have to extradite that guy back to.
Okay.
So, they got him. So some real person took the blame for that for sure. But no, it is. I mean, you sort of said it in the middle of there. Like, how is this? Are we sure this isn't reflective of just Stan Lee's life? Like, people were just illiterate. Their names were alliterative around him, and. It's interesting. Definitely interesting to think about this through that lens of like how he wrote female characters. Geez, especially to think he's writing these female characters when he's nearly 80. Like, they hired a 78 or 9-year-old man to go reinvent their superheroes for a year.
I just love the fact that DC let him do it.
Yeah.
Was that during Jim Lee's tenure?
I think it was pre-Lee. I'm not sure when he came in, but I can look up the editor, I guess.
Because this just goes to show DC traditionally is more daring, I feel like, than Marvel has been. And if you're going to compare Big Two to Big Two, I just feel like DC is when push comes to shove and there's a bold creative choice to make, they make it more often than not. I feel like Marvel's a little safer sometimes. And maybe somebody will be like, nah, I mean, if you have an example that counters that, please let me know. But I just feel like pound for pound, DC always makes slightly, even if it fails miserably, not that this did, but just, even if it goes down in history in flames, it's still part of their catalog and it makes them all the more eclectic as a publisher. I don't know. I dig that about them.
This was Jeanette Kahn was the president and editor in chief at the time. So
interesting.
I don't know much about her tenure there, but I would say if you're a fan of Stan Lee, and especially in this time, like who isn't, still basking in all the great stuff he gave us, and you see any of these Just Imagine comics, grab them. Because and I don't even know if it's I Googled it, but I didn't even look to see if there's a digital version available. So this may be one you gotta dig in the in the long boxes for. But it is bound as if it is a trade paperback, but it's definitely shorter than that. This is it feels like an oversized issue, and especially because they've got that Darwin Cook story at the end. They're giving you a little bit more like sort of bonus material, but this is not even 3 issues, I don't think, of a comic. So it's, he didn't have a lot of time to get the whole story out there.
Kind of sounds like it. By the way, it's worth noting Jeanette Kahn is to DC in my eyes as Stan Lee was to Marvel. Like Jeanette Kahn is, she's the reason Watchmen happened. She's the reason Dark Knight Returns happened. She's the reason, like, she was there, and she's basically was there when Vertigo launched. As an imprint. So like Jeanette Kahn is, we owe a lot of the modern comics industry as it is now to Jeanette Kahn, because she was the one that pushed to get a lot of the British creators over, if you really want to get into her backstory, the director's cut of Watchmen on Blu-ray has a really good featurette on just how it's about Watchmen in terms of its publishing history, but it also talks a lot about DC, and she's featured pretty heavily. And you get a sense of like what she did to push the creative boundaries over at DC. So it makes perfect sense to me that she would have been around when this was published, or that it may have even been on one of her ideas for all I know. Who knows? That's really
very cool. Well, that's really cool to know, because it feels like that. It feels like getting Alan Moore over to do a Watchmen or something like that. Like it's, I was about to say crossover. It's not necessarily that crossover, just like let's hire the unexpected to do something here. So I would love to hear from anyone who listens to this, like how they perceive that DC Marvel split. Is DC willing to take more risks than Marvel? It brings to mind that thing that I read a long time ago, which I've said many times on different episodes, of how Marvel is so occupied with keeping everything in canon that sometimes they don't want to let people just play with their characters in any crazy way. But then as soon as I say that, I think of all the times, Captain America turns out to be a Nazi or something crazy like that. So anyway, I wonder what other people think about that. But until we hear from people, where can people find this podcast?
We are everywhere podcasts are found. I always want to say sold, and that's not.
I know.
It's free. It's free for you, but it's Pocket Cast, Google Play, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts. Just search for Panelism, and you'll find the show. If you're telling a friend about us, just tell them to search for Panelism. And you can also find us online. We are panelism.inc. That is the URL, as well as the Instagram handle. There's a .inc in the handle. Twitter, I think, and anywhere else you want to search for us, just search for panelism.inc. And it pulls up all our past episodes, website, everything like that, all that good stuff. What about you, sir? Anything else you want to promote?
No, I'm good for now. We'll have other updates soon. And it was good talking to you.
Likewise. We'll be back for another book pick soon. And in the meantime, happy reading.
Oh, you know what I'll say?
Oh,
this comes out on Wednesdays. It's New Comic Book Day. And on this New Comic Book Day, go to your local comic book shop and dig through their long boxes to look for Just Imagine Stan Lee. So do it.
Excellent.
All right. Talk to you soon.